Welcome to the second part of the control group guide. In the first part I explained how control groups work in general, the different hotkeys you can use for them, and so on. In the second part I will explain how you might want to assign your control groups, general tips for that, and I will also give examples for all the different races, different unit compositions, and depending on what buildings you have and such. So first let's start off with general tips. How you want to do your control groups in general is you want to assign them in a way that they are convenient for you to use. So for example, if you have, as Undead here, if you would for example have abominations to get in a group of destroyers, that doesn't synergize so well, because you always want your units to synergize the units that are in one control group together. And in this case of the destroyers and abominations, abominations are usually used to frontline, so usually just a move with them. While destroyers, you want to have better control over them, you oftentimes have to pull them away from a fight because they get focused quite a lot, and you also want to have quick access to your destroyers, to just have to press, for example this is control group 2 now, to just press 2 and then you can instantly use Devour Magic with your hotkey that you have assigned. And you have quick access to those units that have specific spells that you need to use quite a lot. And also another reason why destroyers don't synergize so well with abominations is destroyers are air units, so they could just fly across those trees here. So if you have them in a group with your abominations here, if you send them over here, your destroyers will just fly in a direct way while your abominations run all the way around the trees. And that is really inconvenient as well, because if you just run to a certain point, that's okay, usually. But if you run to a certain point and then you see there's an opponent coming, or you scout something, and you instead want to go there, for example, like over here now, and your abominations are over here instead because they wanted to choose the fastest way to here, then it's just inconvenient to control them, because they just use completely different pathing, because one of them is an air unit and one of them is a ground unit. You get the point by now, I guess. Also, for units that synergize well, for example, is you don't want to have abominations together in a group with meat wagons, because what meat wagons oftentimes do is they either siege buildings, and you don't want your abominations to run there, because oftentimes if you siege with meat wagons there is towers as well, and you don't want your abominations, or let's say you group your DK with your meat wagons, you don't want your DK just to run into, let's say, 2 arcane towers and 3 guard towers. You just want to let your meat wagon siege, so it's easier to have them in a separate group, because they have a completely different task than all of the other units that you have. Now this is basically the ground line for control groups, really, especially for units. You just want to assign your units to control groups in a way that they synergize with each other, so you don't want your meat wagons to be in a group with your DK, for example. So it's basically about what is most convenient to you personally, to a certain extent. Some people prefer to have other control groups than other people, of course, because it depends on your personal playstyle, on a personal preference, and so on. Now I'm gonna give examples on what control groups are usually good, and what my personal preference is, and how you might want to do your control groups in general. First of all, let's quickly look at buildings. What I personally do with buildings is I group my altar on 4, my production buildings like the barracks here on 5, and my main building on 6. And blacksmith, or my upgrade building in general like a war mill, graveyard, or hunter's hall, is on group 7. Now what I do as well is, if I play human, I actually only started doing that a few weeks ago, so before that I never really did it, but it is really quite convenient, I think. What I do is I group my arcane towers as well on, let's say, group 8. Oftentimes it's group 7 if I don't have a blacksmith, but if I have a blacksmith I guess I would put them on group 8. Now what it does is you oftentimes have the magic sentry upgrade, so you can use the reroll with your arcane towers. And what also happens quite a lot is you have a lot of arcane towers usually when you have an expansion. And if you then want to use reveal with your arcane towers, and let's say you have 5 of them, but 4 of them have cooldown on reveal, and you need it really quickly to see if there's a Blade Master or something, then you first need to go to your base, by pressing double 6, for example, to center the camera on your main building. Then you have to check every arcane tower if the cooldown is ready or not, and then specifically use it. But instead you can just group all of your arcane towers on one group, and that gives you quick access to reveal and also to focus fire if, let's say, your opponent is sieging here and he has his panda in the front hitting your building, you want to hit the panda with the arcane towers to burn his mana. So that helps as well. And it's also that they have the cooldown here, so if one of the arcane towers has reveal ready, you will easily see it here. And it's basically how I do buildings. Also for production buildings, if you only have a barracks, you only have your barracks in group 5, if group 5 is what you actually want for your production building. Some people use group 3, 4 and 5 for altar, production building and main building I mean. But it really comes down to what you find convenient. This is what I do. Now, if you reach tier 2, for example, you will get additional production buildings like this Arcane Sanctions here. So you want to add them to group 5, and then you have barracks and Arcane Sanction in your group 5. But oftentimes you get to a point as human where you don't want to build any unit out of your barracks anymore, and you just want to use Arcane Sanctions. So at that point you don't want to always have to press group 5, then tab to access your Arcane Sanctions and then build units. Because if you don't need your barracks anymore anyway, you just get it out of the group, and you only have your Arcane Sanctions in the group, the production buildings that you actually need, and then it is just more convenient to access. Same with if you have a workshop against Nidal, for example, to build mortars, you put it in here as well, and you can just cycle through with tab. If you don't need it anymore, you just exclude it out of the group again. This is basically it for buildings and how I personally do it as well. Now let's get to unit compositions. This might be a unit composition that you oftentimes see in a human mirror, for example, or against Night Elf, although against Night Elf the second hero is usually a different one. Now this would be my group 1. Shadow Priest I would put in group 2. And the reason for that is group 1 is basically all the units that are just, they either attack or they run away. They can't do anything else really. Well, except for my heroes of course, but I just have my heroes in here out of convenience as well. Because you might say, I want to put my Archmage on control group 1, Panda on control group 2, and those on 3, because I need to oftentimes access my heroes and their spells. But then you get so many control groups that it is actually a lot harder to control, and it's quite inconvenient. At least I think so. So I rather have all of those units here in control group 1, because they usually attack the same target anyway, and if I want to use the spells on my heroes, the first hero is automatically selected anyway if I select a group, and to the second hero I can easily get with tab. Now I put the Shadow Priest in control group 2, and the reason for that is the Shadow Priest is different from most of the units I have here. First of all, he has spells, so oftentimes I want to have really quick access to him to quickly dispel a water elemental, for example, or an entangle or similar things that I might want to dispel. And also, another thing is the Shadow Priest is really quite squishy, he's easy to kill. So I want to be able to micro him really quickly if he's getting attacked. And if he would be in a group with those units here as well, I would first have to select my group here, and then double click on him to select only him and send him away. And then if I select my control group 1 again, because I want those units to attack a different target, then he's included again and he will start running back in. Which I don't want, so it's better to have him in a separate control group, I feel, because it's just a lot more convenient to control. Now what you oftentimes have as well is you have Militia 2 that you might want to pull, so I have them on group 3. And that's basically how I group my units. I use control group 1, 2 and 3 for units, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 8 for buildings, and I don't use 9 and 0 just because it's too far away to really press, and I don't have anything that I might want to put in there, at least most of the time. Now if I would, for example, summon Water Metal, I would put it in group 1 because it synergizes with those units quite well. Let's get to this unit composition that you oftentimes see against Orc or Night Elf. I put my heroes in group 1 together with my Spellbreakers and my casters in a different group. Now casters are in a different group because they work a little bit differently. Because what you want your control group 1 in this case to do is frontline, block the opponent so he can't get to your casters and kill them easily. And you also want them to oftentimes focus fire one specific unit to, for example, focus fire a Blade Master. And those units are mainly the damage dealers of your army, while the spellcasters here, as the name suggests, mainly cast spells. Also, another thing is, if you would right-click an opponent unit, or, well, A-click, to just attack it, then casters just attack a spell instead of casting their spell. So if I would let those units here attack, they would never really cast their spells, but just keep attacking until the unit is dead, which is not what I want. I rather want to have slows and heal from my priest. And if you A-move with casters that have a spell on auto cast, what it will do is, if you use attack move, they won't attack if they find an enemy unit or something that they can heal. Instead, they will first use their spell, and if they cannot use their spell anymore because they have cooldown, they're out of mana, or there's nothing to heal for the priest, then they will start attacking. So what you usually do as human with your casters is you just let your casters attack move, so they use their spells all the time, while focus firing with those units here. Now what happens if you get additional spell breakers, for example? The game can oftentimes get to a point where you might have up to 12 spell breakers, or for example 11, 10, something like that. The point is, you might get to a point where you have so many spell breakers that you can't put them in a group anymore together with your heroes, and then you need to do a second control group for that. Now what I personally like to do is, I group my breakers in one group and my heroes together with my casters in one group. The reason for that is, I still want my heroes to focus fire usually, but if I have so many spell breakers already, I don't need my heroes to frontline anymore. And also, I have a bigger army, so my opponent usually has a bigger army as well, which means he has an easier time hero focusing if my heroes are in a bad position. So I rather want my heroes, instead of being in the front line, like they were before with only 6 spell breakers, I rather want them to be in the back line, to keep them safe more easily. And then I also don't care so much what they are attacking, because oftentimes at this point you have Blizzard with your Archmage anyway.
Get on with it.
So instead I put my spellbreakers in one group and my heroes together with my casters, and I still just A-move with this group, so my casters use their spells all the time and my heroes can attack whatever, but I can also, of course, just select my heroes to attack one specific target if I want to do so.
Be quick.
You could also do it like this, for example, by grouping your heroes in one group, casters in another group, and breakers in a separate group as well. But then you have additional control groups, and you don't have any more space for your militia on group 3, at least I don't, because I would like to have my altar on group 4. Although you can group your militia in group 4 and just basically ignore the altar, that works just fine as well, because at this point you don't need it so much anyway. But I think having so many control groups then in the fight is just hard to control, and your heroes basically do the same as your casters most of the time anyway. If you want to run away a little bit from your opponent to get into a better position, you want your heroes to move with your casters basically, and not separately really. So it's just more convenient to have them in a group with your casters. At least that's how I see it. Now another unit composition you might have as human against undead would be this one here, where I would put those in group 1. Those are just my units I used to attack again, like the Spellbreakers earlier, or my Trouble Circle Footmen, and all the stuff earlier as well. I just want those here to mostly A-move against undead, or focus fire a fiend, focus fire a hero, use them to surround and so on. And I would have Gyros as well against the Arians from the undead, so I put them in control group 2. Maybe I want militia as well, I put them in 3, and I'm good to go. Also, another reason why I do my control groups like this, especially with this unit composition here, I have my Shadow Priest in a separate control group, because oftentimes with my first control group, especially in this situation, I want to use them to surround, because it's mostly melee units and such, and the units that are actually made for straight up fighting. And if I would surround with my Shadow Priest to get in the group, he could easily be picked off, and I rather want him to stay in a defensive position. That's also another reason why I want, for example, the Shadow Priest or casters to be in a different group, because I don't want to surround a Demon Hunter with Immolation with my casters, for example. Anyway, this is basically it for unit for human, for the most common unit compositions, I would say. And it's really just about also your personal preference. What is most convenient for you? You don't need to necessarily use the unit compositions, well, the control groups for those units that I use. It's just what you feel most comfortable with. I think this is the best. Now let's look at something with Orc here. As Orc, you oftentimes have your Blightmaster here, your Shadow Hunter, and your Spirit Walkers, and Raiders. This is like your usually in composition. What I oftentimes do is I have Blightmaster on Control Group 1, because he just does a lot of different things than the usual units do, like windwalking completely through the opponent's army and hitting the Archmage in the backline, for example. And if I would have my Blightmaster together with those units here in a group, and I would use the whole group to windwalk and try to go for the Archmage, those would just run into Spellbreakers and not get anywhere. Just get in a bad position and waste their time, so I prefer to have Blightmaster in one control group usually, and do it like this, for example. Raiders in one group here, because I want quick access to them. They are usually the units that attack, for example, casters or buildings, while those units here rather attack the front line, for example. And you can just access the Spirit Walkers by pressing tab once. If you press Control Group 2, press tab once and you have the Spirit Walkers. A lot of people don't find this so convenient though, and I don't either to a certain extent, because oftentimes I want my Spirit Walkers to be in a different group because I want them to focus different units, for example, or just to have more quick access to Spirit Link and Disenchant. So what you often see from Orcs is this. They do control groups like this, like 1, 2, 3. Or Raiders can be 2, Spirit Walkers can be 3, it's just your preference really. And this works quite well because those units here usually want to attack, for example, Spellbreakers because grants deal bonus damage to those. Here Sunrise to focus on a spell. While you want your Spirit Walkers to, for example, focus Sword Elementals because they have heavy armor, so Spirit Walkers deal bonus damage, I mean. And your Raiders to attack casters because, again, they deal bonus damage to those casters and such, and you want quick access to Ensnare. The only issue with that is, though, that your Blightmaster wants to oftentimes, as I said earlier, run straight through the army, go for the Archmage, for example, and then it doesn't synergize so well, but that's why you can just press F1 to select your Archmage. Well, in this case it's not F1, but just click the F1 key usually to access your Blightmaster and then do that action with him. Now for this unit composition, for example, that you can sometimes see against Undead, I put my 3 heroes in a group for sure, together with those Berserkers, and the Raiders in a separate group here. So this is Control Group 1, Control Group 2, and I have Bad Riders as well, so I want them in a separate group for sure, because I want to have quick access to that suicide spell to kill area units, and also their area units, as explained earlier, with Destroyers and Abominations. They don't synergize so well with ground units, so you want to have them in a different group oftentimes. So I would group my Raiders here, and since I don't want to have 4 control groups really, I just put my Codas together in a group with the Raiders, because it still synergizes quite well. Codas usually deal bonus damage to the same units that Raiders deal bonus damage to, and you can just cycle through to your Codas and then use Devour like that. And then have your Banner Rise on Control Group 3. So that's what I would do for this kind of unit composition here. You could also, of course, have this on 1, Raiders here on 2, Codas on 3, and Bad Riders on 4. It really just depends on what you prefer. And also for Orc, as with Human earlier, production buildings on 5. If I don't want my barracks anymore, I exclude it. Main building on 6, altar on 4, Warmal on 7, and what you might want to do with Orc, is you want to group your lumber peasants, same as with militia, because you oftentimes in the late game want to pull them to the army as well, to spread Spirit Link damage and so on, so you could, for example, group them on, let's say, Group 8 or Group 9 or Group 0, whatever you want to do. So you have quick access to them, you can also quickly send them to burrows, you can quickly pull them to your army, and so on. Now for Undead, you oftentimes see this unit composition, for example. Again, I put my heroes together in a group with the units that are just used for attacking mainly, and I really like this Fiends for focus firing. Now, I might have some Abominations later on as well. I just put them in the same group, because they're still okay for focus firing if I don't have too many, or I just focus fire with my whole group here, then select the Abominations and let them A-move, for example, or attack the target that is closest. Now, I also have Destroyers oftentimes, so I put them in group 2. I want to have quick access to them because they are spellcasters. I need to use the Devour magic quite quickly. There are also area units, they don't synergize so well with this group here, so I want them in a separate group. And then I also have Obsidian statues. I put this in group 3, so I just have my healing and mana here. And Obsidian statues, you never want them to attack really, so you just let them A move or quickly access them to quickly press the hotkeys here for heal or mana, and to reposition them and so on. Now you could also have this kind of unit composition here, with those units here, control group 1, and 2 statues for regeneration, and 2 meat wagons to siege the enemy humans expansion. So I would have the meat wagons in control group 3, this would be 2, and this would be 1. And another thing is, if you have, for example, an Abomination spell and a Frostworm, you can put the Frostworm together in a group with this army here, because he's not a spellcaster, but it's an air unit, so it doesn't synergize so well by flying across trees and such, but oftentimes that's not the case with this kind of unit composition, so you can put a Frostworm in here if you like. You can also, if you have destroyers, put them in a group with those destroyers, and that works just fine as well. It really just depends on what you think is convenient to be able to control your units well. And if you have statues still as well, you just put them on, let's say, control group 3 again. And having a maximum of 3 control groups is usually, I think, most convenient for handling your army properly, because imagine you have 5 control groups. If you want to send your whole army back, you need to press 1 right click, 2 right click, 3 right click, 4 right click, 5 right click, and then again if you want to turn around and fight again, you need to do the same with A move or focus fire, and it's just too much to press. It just takes too much time. That's why you don't want to have more than 3 control groups usually. And also, again, if you want to cast spells with your heroes, you can select them with F1, F2, F3, or you can just select control group 1 and cycle through them with tab. It's just something you need to get used to, basically. Now for Nido, for example, you oftentimes see this kind of unit composition here. Maybe together with Fairy Dragons against human, for example. Even against Orc on Twisted Meadows, if you go for the Rights Bears. Although the second hero would be Keeper in that case. So let's say we play against human with this unit composition. I would put my heroes together with my bears in one group. Can use Reacher here and transform them. So this would be my fighting setup, basically. Then I put my Dryads in control group 2. The reason for that is I want quick access to my Dryads, so I can quickly dispel water elementals. I also want to let control group 1A move most of the time. Maybe then select my Demon Hunter with F1 to mana burn something or attack a different target. Same for my Panda. I just press tab for Breath of Fire and so on. Now also, if you fight against human, for example, I oftentimes have Breakers, Casters, Mortars, and you want to have quick access to your Dryads to move them around to dodge the mortar shots, maybe run into the back of his army to focus his mortars down or something like this. While control group 1, like the bears, are usually mostly A moving in this matchup, so it's more convenient to have the Dryads in a different control group because of the dispel and because they just have a different task in the fight and they run around a lot more. Because if we would have them in the same control group, let's say this would be A moving, and your Dryads want to move to the back of an army there. If you have them all in one control group, you A move, and then you want to send your Dryads over there somehow, and you yourself the whole control group selected, and you just completely mess the fight up. So this would be 1, 2, and if I have Fire Dragons, it's 3. Now another thing is, Demon Hunter is Orb of Venom, so he can attack air units. And if you fight against Undead with this army composition, let's ignore the Fire Dragons in that part. If you have that Orb of Venom and Dryads, your Demon Hunter and your Dryads can attack air units, and Undead basically always has air units in this matchup. So what I do instead of grouping my Demon Hunter with my Panda and Bears in one group, I group my Demon Hunter together with the Dryads in one group, because those are the units that can attack air, while those here can only attack ground units. So I let this here A move or focus fire a fiend, while using this group here to attack air units mainly. So it also depends on if your opponent has air units, if you have Orb of Venom, and so on. So as I said earlier, it's always about how well do your units synergize together that you have in one group, and how convenient is that for you to control. That's basically the main message of this video anyway, I guess. Now for last unit composition here, your usual Talon unit composition in Nido versus Orc. What I would do is I would group my heroes in group 1 together with Quillbeasts and Archers if I still have any. because those units here are mainly used for actually dealing damage, for focus firing something, and also to frontline, together with the Pocket Factory and Quill Beasts and so on. While I want to have the talents in a separate group, which would be group 2, because I want to have quick access to my talents to quickly cast a Cyclone on the enemy Blightmaster or the TC, or just Raiders or whatever, to just have quick access to the spellcaster to quickly be able to use the spells. Also, I mainly want those here to frontline, so keep in mind I, for example, let them focus fire a Raider, while I might want to send my talents away to reposition them a bit, while I want to let those keep fighting. So I only want to move my talents back, so I use Control Group 2. And then I have easy access to them, and it just synergizes as well with those groups here. You also oftentimes have Fairy Dragons on Group 3 here against Orc. You want to have them in a separate group because, again, they are aerial units. You want to have them in quite special positions sometimes, in the middle of the enemy's army, for example, and so on, so they definitely deserve a separate control group. Now you might also want to group your Wisps here in a control group, or at least some of them, to be able to use them in a fight, let's say in control group 4 if you don't necessarily need your Altar so much anymore, or on control group 8 or whatever is convenient for you. Same again as for Human and Orc already. Same goes for those buildings here, so main building on group 6 for me personally, production buildings on 5. I don't need my Ancient of 4 anymore if I only play talents here, so I don't have it grouped in my production building group anymore. Altar for me is group 4 as well. Hunter's Hall, if I have it, is in group 7. If I have Ancients of Lore, I have those instead as production buildings on 5, and so on. Another thing is for Undead also, oftentimes in late game you also want to pull your Lumber Ghouls quickly into a fight, so you might want to have those grouped on, let's say, group 8 or something as well, because you almost never need to access them. Most of the time only once when you actually want to pull them into a fight, like the Wisps here as Night Elf, and the Peons as Orcs, so you don't want to, for example, use your control group 3 for those Slumber Ghouls if you only use them 1 or 2 times in a single game, actually. And that is basically it. If you have additional questions on what the unit on how you might want to assign your control groups depending on the unit composition and such, you can of course just ask in the comments or shoot me a message somewhere. That's just fine, I'm always open for that. I hope this brings clarity to how you might want to do your control groups, what is convenient, like if the Demon Hunter can attack area or not, if the opponent has area units, and so on. And I hope this helped you to make your own decisions on how you want to do your control groups, what is most convenient for you. Of course you have to try stuff out a lot. If having your production buildings on 5 instead of 4, for example, is good for you, maybe you want to instead have them on 4, and so on. It's really just try to find what is best for you, what you are most comfortable with, and just go with that. At this point, I would also like to note, I don't think you should really take control groups, especially for how to group your buildings, from other people most of the time. Well, I mean, of course you want to see like that they group their production buildings in one group and so on, but you don't want to see like, oh hey, this pro player is using this special control group setup, I'm gonna use that as well. That might be really inconvenient for you. As I said, do what's best for you personally and try to find what you like the most.